Over the last few years of working in crypto, I've accrued more NFTs and altcoins and random crypto assets than I can count across more chains than I can remember. And it's always been a struggle to find a single crypto wallet where I can track everything I own. That is, until I discovered Zerion. Zerion Wallet is for everything you own on chain. Yes, that includes all of your assets across more than 14 different networks. Zerion is giving people the chance to be true owners by making it simple to explore, collect, mint, test, and contribute to the new internet. Go to zerion.io/download today to take ownership over your on-chain assets, available on iOS, Android, and desktop. Hey everybody, welcome to our final episode of Season 7 of Rehash, a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and today we're speaking with Caitlin Cook, Head of Communications and Marketing at Hxro Labs, a distributed liquidity layer for derivatives trading and betting on Solana. Caitlin is the first guest from the Solana ecosystem that we've had on the podcast, so I couldn't pass on the opportunity to ask her all the questions about Solana. I must confess, I was a little too quick to dismiss Solana in the last cycle, and clearly they persisted through the bear and are doing extremely well now despite everything they've been through, including all of the SBF drama. Caitlin talks about some trends that she's seen on Solana that are unique to the ecosystem, why she believes Solana has grown so much, and what role she sees Solana playing in our multi-chain world moving forward. Prior to joining Hxro Labs, where she works now, she was a DeFi educator and content creator for about 18 months, primarily educating TradFi institutions, which is her background, about DeFi, but also creating educational content for the general public as well. I asked her about her experiences with that and what she found to be the most convincing narratives for both the general public as well as TradFi institutions to pique their curiosity about DeFi and begin to onboard them into crypto. She shared some great insights here that could be helpful for all of us as we try to onboard the next billion to crypto. It's hard to believe that this is already our final episode of Season 7, but we do have one final bonus episode coming to you on Monday, and then we'll be taking a short break until Season 8 begins next month. In the meantime, make sure you join our Telegram community at t.me/rehashweb3 and follow us on socials at rehashweb3 to catch short clips and stay up to date on any new announcements. And if you would like to sponsor a future season of Rehash, please check out rehashweb3.com/sponsor for all the information about sponsoring the podcast, or reach out to rehashweb3@gmail.com. Caitlin was nominated by Andy Boyan and voted onto the podcast by Andy Boyan and me, Diana Chen. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Caitlin. Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for coming on Rehash and taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be the first Solana feature on this podcast. Hopefully one of them will come, potentially, if this doesn't go
potentially. I'm totally open to it. The community, I think, is also getting more and more interested by Solana with how much Solana has come back this cycle. So I could totally see that happening. It's definitely not a conscious thing that we haven't had any Solana people on the podcast in the past. I think it's just people vote for whoever's in their networks and who they know about. We were talking about this off air earlier, how, it's not necessarily that I'm an ETH maxi or you're a Solana maxi. It's just these are the ecosystems we've existed in, and that's what we know the most about. So I am really excited to have you on because I have to admit, last cycle, I completely dismissed Solana. I just didn't pay attention to it at all. I was wrapped up in my ETH world. And then Solana came back full force. And I was like, damn it, I really should have paid attention the first time because now I feel like I'm so far behind, don't know anything about it. So to start off, could you just give us a Solana primer? Like, tell us high level, what are kind of the key points about Solana that we should all know about?
Oh man. Well, first of all, I just want to preface this by saying I'm not a technical person, and I know I told you this offline as well. So just for anyone who watches this, I'm not like a dev deep in the trenches of code or in Rust or anything like that. So definitely more of like a high level, bigger picture person, which I think is maybe good for this.
Definitely good for this. I'm not a technical person either, so you'd be talking way over my head, and most of our listeners aren't technical either, so this is perfect.
Awesome. All right. So Solana, I guess in kind of the most general sort of terms, at least, or as general as we can get it. Founded in 2017, high performance blockchain, permissionless, of course, all of those, buzzwords that we get with blockchains. Big focus with Solana is supporting high growth, high frequency blockchain applications. So what does that mean? You look at what Ethereum started with, and I think, we get into a lot of more cult-like type of discussions on Twitter and in that sort of echo chamber, but realistically, what Ethereum kicked off was, you look at what chains existed even, 3-4 years ago, and you look to the future, like Ethereum really kicked off this idea that there can be applications of blockchain tech far beyond what Bitcoin started with. And we've seen that go 1,000 different directions since. And what Solana is optimizing for is for speed at very, very low cost, high throughput, high frequency, low cost. Those are kind of the high level items there. And really what that enables is a lot of really, really interesting different applications, which we can go into. I come from a background in finance. So for me, what kind of makes it the most exciting is, people always like to meme about like Ethereum gas fees and whatnot, and in terms of throughput for Ethereum too. It's interesting, even coming from financial markets and trading, all of those are based on very, very high frequency, high throughput, really, really high frequency of activity, of trades being placed at any hour, et cetera. And really what I think Solana kicked off, and we've seen a lot of other chains kind of focusing on speed and low cost since, is bringing financial applications, taking these financial rails that blockchain enables and value transfer on chain, and really leveling it up to something that can compete with what we see in the traditional world for really important markets. Financial markets around the world are billions and billions of dollars, trillions of dollars in value being passed around. You really, really need low cost, high throughput, very, very speedy transactions and settlement to even compete with what's available today in the traditional side, and to level that up even more. So that's kind of what interests me the most about something like Solana. And we've seen a lot of other chains come about with a focus on the same types of principles as well from that. And there's a lot of retail applications of what Solana has built as well. And we can kind of talk about some of the things that I find interesting that have been built that focus a little bit less on maybe transactions per second and speed, and more of kind of consumer level, consumer friendly types of use cases.
So when we talk about DeFi, what types of projects or what types of actions within the realm of DeFi require that really fast speeds and low cost? Like, do we see certain projects or certain types of actions taking place a lot more in the Solana ecosystem than in Ethereum, for example, because Solana does have that speed advantage?
I think in terms of numbers, we've been seeing things creep up from a DeFi perspective in general, and just sort of trading activity. So going back more on financial market type of stuff. So spot trading, derivatives trading, all of those things, whether you're a retail user or like a large institutional money manager, a large trading desk, a retail trader with a really big book that you're just kind of aping into things on chain by yourself with a lot of money, you're going to need all of that is a competition for speed, being the first to, get your transaction through. And it's all sort of like all of these different participants in a market that are racing to get their trades in and out, whether that's buy, sell, long, short, etc. So super, super important there, just very baseline, whether that's spot trading or derivatives. And those are both absolutely massive markets on chain. See a lot of decentralized exchanges popping up that have been supported on Solana. Obviously see those a lot of other chains as well. So that's nothing particularly specific to Solana, but I do think that the tech supports it very well. And then I guess beyond that, just generally in DeFi, I mean, the transaction cost part, no matter what you're doing, is important. So we've seen a lot of borrow lend that goes into trading as well too. You don't want to have these massive fees just to move your funds from one place to another, and that kind of stacks up very, very quickly. It's definitely more of optimizing a lot of the functions that maybe developers on Ethereum brought about to begin with, and making it cheaper and faster. And then a big focus on UX as well, which I've noticed in Solana, which, I mean, we've seen everyone across different ecosystems emphasizing that more and more. But I've heard a lot of feedback, even in I am in Ethereum group chats as well, with a lot of Ethereum ecosystem people. And continuously the feedback has been around Solana user experience. And when you take the jump from maybe EVM world to Solana, the user experience aspect of it has gotten a lot of really positive reviews as well, not just because of speed and cost, but like the user interfaces as well. So there's definitely a lot of components to it, but I'll stop rambling there.
No, that's great. I was just going to say, why do you think that is, that there's been like a heavier emphasis on UX in the Solana ecosystem?
I don't know. And I'm never going to like speak and say something is only happening on Solana, because you know that that's just never the case, right? That's just the silo that I'm in. But it is funny to get a lot of feedback from more Ethereum aligned people that have been in crypto for a very long time, saying that for some reason the user experience is better and maybe the user interfaces are a little bit more developed, maybe a little bit more of a focus on it. I think it's more of just a time thing as well though, right? Like as the baseline tech and the infrastructure gets more established and more built out, people will have more time naturally to focus on the user facing side of things and to optimize it. And I think as we've seen, you know, a lot of the projects in Ethereum world that definitely laid the baseline for a lot of other people to come in and build applications either like on top of, based off of, inspired by, it's only going to further improve over time, seeing what people before you have built and trying to optimize on that and make it better. Otherwise, why are you building what you're building if the goal is not to make it better than what's already existed? So I think it's a natural progression with the tech and trying to get more retail facing or like more normie type of people, which I don't really like to call because that's literally most of the population at this point, but trying to onboard people that aren't already into crypto. Like the user experience has to be fast, cheap, and very, very simple. So I think people are realizing that as well.
Yeah, 100%. I also wonder if part of it might be because I'm just imagining outside of DeFi, I'm thinking about use cases that really require speed, like fast transaction times, low cost. And the first thing that comes to mind is gaming. Is that a big category of projects that are being built on Solana?
I've seen it pop up more and more. I wish I could remember the name on the spot right now, but literally just yesterday, I think Solana Foundation announced that like a really, really big gaming outfit on chain is like bringing a game to Solana. And I do think that that's been a trend. I'm not like super deep in the weeds on that side of things, but I've seen it come up a fair amount. I've seen it around on my Twitter feeds, but not super competent to speak on a lot of that. It's definitely been popping up more and more for me, like anecdotally though.
What other trends have you been seeing of projects being built on Solana? And feel free to shout out some names of projects too that you think are really cool.
The things I get the most excited about outside of DeFi, right? Because that's like a very nerdy specific side of things, right? Like coming from finance, I get excited about, oh, well, we can take these multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar derivatives markets, bring them on chain, have 24/7 trading activity, high liquidity, instant settlement, low fees, actually competing with what we've seen in the traditional world and trying to make that better. That excites me. What I realize is that doesn't excite a lot of people, right? Like if you're not in it or coming from a background like that, that's not the sexiest thing. What I've been really excited about outside of DeFi, and I can shout out a couple specific projects because I think it's less of a trend. I mean, you've seen people trying to build more retail friendly, more mainstream types of applications in the past. That's not new, but there are a couple that I'm super excited about and I feel like have been going about it the right way. First one is called XP Ticket, team of very senior developers that have built on-chain, off-chain in terms of like user-facing like applications and different types of things, a whole bunch of different stuff, like very seasoned team, which is great. But basically what they're going after is the ticket market, secondary ticket sales. Think about going and buying a ticket off the market that you really want to go to. You go to check out, all of those fees that are tacked on is absolutely abysmal. But there are only like 2 or 3 different parties that are kind of controlling all of those tickets, right? So how much can you do about that? What XP is doing is going around like city by city even, mostly North America, US, Canada, but expanding beyond that as they go, of going to different ticket brokers and negotiating deals, of bringing them tickets to their platform, having them on-chain verifiable, very instantly transfer. If you wanted to buy a ticket from me, they have a ability for me to transfer it to you automatically, shows up, very, very low cost. I actually like used it recently. They just have every concert you could think of, especially in Chicago because the team is based here. It's just so seamless. And that's something that I've experienced time and time again as like a huge fan of live music, of it's such a pain having to pay all of these extra fees and it's so clunky. And like I couldn't go to a concert recently because I had a friend transfer me a ticket from one of those secondary ticket sales platforms and it just didn't go through. Like it got lost and they couldn't verify that it actually was sent to me. And imagine if that was an NFT form where it's literally on-chain verifiable and instant settlement where it's passed to me right away and that transaction can't be lost. So I think that's an obvious one that's actually been seeing like a lot of traction, and they've been doing very, very well of kind of scaling up the business very fast. And that's an obvious need to me that normal people can understand without being blockchain nerds. And they've even gone to the point, which I think is really important from a payment perspective, of not only allowing payment in USDC or stablecoins, but also allowing for a small fee for like credit cards and whatnot. So then I can go to my friends and say, hey, I want to go to this concert. I'm buying tickets. Go to this site. And they can do that, not being used to doing on-chain transactions and not feel intimidated. So I think the way that blockchains win is, one, at some point not having to worry about what chain you're transacting on. At some point, when if crypto ever wins, to me it's users not having to care what chain it's on or caring that it's on chain at all. It just works. And then also being able to onboard to it really smoothly. So that one I rave about all the time, because I don't think they've gone super heavy on the marketing yet, but I'm hoping that they kick that up soon. I haven't seen people really tackle that market successfully in the way that they, I think, are going to. And then the other side, because you follow me on Twitter, always been a big proponent of get outside, big proponent of like going for walks and making that a daily part of your routine, mental health, physical health, everything. One app that's coming live, I guess it's in beta, but they're running contests and whatnot, like closed beta, if you will, but it's called Moonwalk. And it's basically a fitness accountability project. Essentially what you can do, and like when it's open more to the public, I could start a game, say the goal for today or for this contest is 10,000 steps a day. You can pick the number to be whatever you want. 10,000 has been what it's been in a lot of the contests I've seen being tested so far. I've seen a couple do 12,000 steps. That's like 6 miles. And basically what happens is you set in whatever token you want it to be. It could be USDC, it could be Solana, it could be Bonk, it could be whatever you want. You set an initial submission that you as a user wanting to enter this contest have to put up at the start. Say it's 100 USDC. That's my USDC still when I'm entered in the contest. And the only way that I lose any of that money is by not hitting my step requirement for the day. You have to have a smartwatch. That's obviously a little bit of a barrier to track your steps accurately within the app. But if I hit my 10,000 steps every day, that $100 stays mine. If the contest ends and I hit the mark every day, I lose nothing. But if I miss the mark on even one of those days, it takes part of the money that I submitted and it goes to a prize pool. And the prize pool by the end of the contest goes to the person who had the most steps, or is split between the people who hit their mark every day. And I just think that is devious. Like that is another one that I explained to my mom, who literally sent me an article saying Bitcoin hit all-time highs last week, or not all-time highs, all-time highs. Great, we're back. She sent me this article that said Bitcoin hits all-time highs, and she asked if I have any. I've been working in crypto for like 3 or 4 years. I'm like, yes, I do have some Bitcoin. That's great. So she's not really ever taken to anything in this space. I explained Moonwalk to her. She's like, I love that. Because it's such a fun way to gamify something that everyone should realistically be doing. And it doesn't matter if you like crypto or not. And they're going to be working on onboarding to allow for like non-crypto payments as well. And that's something that I think really gamifies the experience and makes it really fun and really simple, but you're transacting and engaging with blockchain. So kind of a long-winded answer, but those are two. Obviously a lot of others as well, but those ones I think make sense to people who aren't in the space and that they'd actually be interested in using, hopefully.
Yeah, I think both of those are super cool. And I think what we need to do more of in this space is build out projects that are linking blockchain and Web3 tools to real life scenarios, not just improving upon Web2 things, but like improving upon physical life, Web0, pre-Web things that people go through. Living where I live now, kind of in the middle of nowhere, it's made me realize that outside of the cities, a lot of people aren't even onboarded onto Web2 fully yet. It's such a bubble that I think most people in Web3 live in like Williamsburg and in major cities in London and like wherever around the world, that I think we can sometimes forget that a majority of people in the world are still living like a very physical life, you know, where a lot of my friends here are not only like not actively using tech and they're not like passionate about emerging tech like all of our friends in this space are, but they're actually like kind of anti-tech. Like, this isn't what's real. This isn't what matters. We want to do things that we can touch, that we can feel, that like have to do with the earth and our physical surroundings. And so seeing that, I think, has been really eye-opening to me, that like in order to really reach the masses with crypto, that I think we need to think outside of how do we improve Web 2 with Web 3, but how do we improve our physical lives, like our pre-web lives with Web 3 tooling. And I think both of those examples you just gave hit the spot.
Yeah, what you just said is so important, and probably my biggest pet peeve about being in that sort of crypto echo chamber sometimes, and it kind of gets to me. It's a very dev heavy space, and I do think that when you're passionately building something and you're passionate about that, you assume that other people are going to be excited about that, or that it applies to the majority of people. And we often get into this space of, right, like we both are in crypto, right? So we can get excited about these things and maybe think that what we're doing is the important thing. But then I just encourage people to get out and talk to most people, normal people, people not working in tech, people not working in crypto. Because if you want crypto to scale beyond a certain point, we're going to have to care about that. And we have to go to them, not them come to us. They're not going to care about our incredibly niche, highly technical software advancement on chain, right? Like that's good and has a purpose, but I think people forget sometimes when they're raving about the really nerdy things that how is this applying to the majority of people, and are people going to use it? I definitely get a little critical sometimes when I see some of the commentary that's put out from people across different chains of just hyping themselves up so much, and it's just this hype fest. And you're like, okay, well, that's great that you're excited. Passion's important, but also thinking purpose-wise of actually scaling and who you're building for. The apps I just mentioned, like those things are considering everyday people. What do people actually care about? What are bottlenecks in everyday life that blockchain could actually solve for? And how do we make it really, really easy for everyday people to access those things? So it makes me happy that you say that, because it's refreshing. And we don't see enough people talking about things that way. Like, get out of your echo chamber and talk to everyday people. They don't care about half of what you're building. And I know that it's early. That's like such a meme that people say we're so early. We are, but we're going to continue to be early and maybe not get much further if we only focus on these super niche things that aren't necessarily fixing something that most people or large markets care about.
Exactly. Yeah. I really do think that this upcoming cycle is going to be a critical point, because at this stage, crypto's been around for so long that I think if we don't really hit some sort of escape velocity with getting crypto to the masses with this next cycle, that kind of worries me. And that makes me nervous about how people are going to continue to perceive crypto. And the longer we delay the process of opening it up, making it friendly and welcoming to the public, the harder it's going to be to get to the masses. So I really do think that dialogue like this needs to exist more and more in the space. I speak from experience when I say that launching a DAO is not easy work. I've spent countless hours trying to figure out how to manage a community, get people to vote on proposals, and figure out how to set everything up on chain. Tally does all of that hard work for me while providing a full suite of tools for my community to create drafts, collaborate on proposals, incentivize voting, and most importantly, stay safe and secure on chain while doing it all. Tally is the home of DAO governance. Launch your DAO with Tally at tally.xyz. So speaking of, we've kind of talked about this a little bit in the future. I think we both agree that there's going to be this multi-chain world. I mean, some might argue that we're already in a multi-chain world, but I'm curious from your perspective, what do you see that multi-chain world looking like in the future? And what role do you see Solana playing in that big picture?
I think hopefully a much, much smoother, more simplistic way to move assets across chains. And I've seen like there are definitely some teams that are focusing on cross-chain and making that much simpler and cleaner and safer, which is very important, obviously, for people moving large sums of money and making sure that that's actually safe and easy to do. I think the future definitely looks like that. And I think it looks like not caring what chain you're on or why, again, just works, just fast, just simple to use, just cheap, better than what you were using before in a majority of cases. I think where Solana plays into that is definitely going to be I go back and forth on this sometimes because I'm definitely partial to like the financial market side where I do think there's a big opportunity there. Like different vendors like Visa choosing Solana for like stablecoin rails, right? Like that's huge. And I think that there's an opportunity for stuff like that to continue. So in one angle, I do see from a financial perspective and value transfer and stablecoins and financial markets, derivatives, spot trading, et cetera. Like I do think that it would have a very good home on Solana from a tech standpoint. But I also then see the other side of what's emerging from like even Moonwalk and XP Ticket and others like I was just talking to you about of if you are a normal everyday person and you want to interact with something on chain, the process needs to be fast and seamless and cheap. And I do think that we've seen a lot of developer talent coming to Solana for those reasons. Again, not just Solana, but I'm in that world and I've definitely noticed it. I think that there's a really, really big opportunity to kind of be the consumer app chain as well and building out a lot of really interesting applications that everyday people can use and not have to worry about or be confused by. Not sure exactly what it looks like beyond that yet, but I do think that the tribal part of what we see in crypto these days is more, I think from a builder perspective, it's great and having people passionate and being very technically diligent and worrying about the details of the things that they're building and the chains they're building on. Like that matters from a development standpoint, but the way that crypto wins is when we get beyond that and scale products that are the best products that they can be regardless of where they are and getting users to onboard to them and focusing on that part of the experience. So I think we're getting closer to it, but I agree with you that I think that this next cycle is going to be very important. And I even have like traditional finance friends all the time. Oh, well, crypto's been around for X number of years and all it's done is turn into a casino. First of all, gambling and the speculative nature of it is a feature, not a bug. And that's also a massive multi-billion-dollar global market. Do not fade the importance and role that will play now and in the future. It does matter. And it is obviously a product market fit with what we've seen. Hopefully not the only one. But all of these friends are like, oh, well, crypto's been around forever. And then look at AI and how fast that scaled to having use cases that people actually want. I'm like, okay, maybe apples and oranges there in terms of comparison, but it's not a great look, right? So hopefully this next cycle, we see a much more heightened focus on purpose and really driving forward to things that people outside of this little circle can perceive as valuable and worthwhile.
I think another thing too is making the space feel more welcoming and open to people. And I think that's where I'm curious to hear your take on, since you are in the Solana ecosystem and in like some Ethereum group chats and you're exposed to that community as well, how would you describe the vibes or like the culture in the Solana ecosystem as opposed to Ethereum or other blockchain ecosystems that you might be part of?
Well, right now it's definitely euphoric because as you know, price goes up, the tech just gets better. So you have a lot of people that you never really saw talking about Solana, which definitely makes the community very, very euphoric and happy. I will say though, and I do find this to be a particularly Solana specific phenomenon, like stronger than in other places, again, anecdotally, but the passion from the community, it's a double-edged sword to be sure. When we see that play out on Twitter and other places, but no matter the conditions of like where Solana is from a price perspective, from a tech perspective, where the market's at, the community has been really, really unwavering in mission of building out what they're building, whether it's DeFi, whether it's more consumer-facing apps, whatever it may be, even in the midst of FTX, right? Like give that as an example. That could have been the darkest possible days. Everyone thought it was dead. There was such a strong community that literally never left. So unwavering. And like, it's hard to fade that at some point. I know a lot of people troll Solana community for even having gone through that or like, oh, it's the SAM chain with SBF and whatnot. But it also made it to the other side and like literally just can't die. Like you don't really want to fade the people that just don't quit. So I think that commitment speaks a lot, and seeing things turn around from a market perspective more broadly and specifically Solana, even in the past few months, it's just been so positive. And there's a lot of, which I mean, this is, again, I see this in other ecosystems as well, but it's great to see balancing out the euphoria is from a tech perspective, there is so many nerdy technical debates about all of these niche things where I'm like, I don't understand any of that. Does that matter? But like the developers are just like nonstop, in addition to building, having these very critical conversations, arguments, holding each other accountable a lot. I'd like to see more of that for sure, but it's a very passionate group of people. And that's something that I've seen in feedback from VCs. I've seen that from people in other communities as well. It's hard to not acknowledge that part. Again, double-edged sword of like, you see people fighting nonstop about timeline to defend Solana's honor sometimes, which I'm like, at what point do you stop? But it's nice to see, right? That passion is important when you're building something at an early stage. And if you don't have that, you're not going to survive the ups and downs, because startups, as like just generally speaking, are really, really hard. Building in a niche space, new tech, very hard, very competitive. And most people would jump ship if they didn't have that passion. So I find that very bullish. And I think it's kind of starting to see reaping the rewards of that, at least in the early stages of it right now.
So you might have just answered this question, but I thought this question from Twitter that we got was interesting. It's from Walter Rodriguez. He says, why has Solana seen so much growth lately? And I mean, maybe that's the answer, is that everybody working on it is so passionate, but do you have any other insights on that?
I think there's definitely been a big inflow of interest recently as well, from not only like that core community that stuck around, which I do think is a big part of its success so far. Like, these people just didn't abandon ship, which is great. Like, they truly are passionate about Solana, what it is trying to solve for, what it's trying to bring, the experience that it's trying to improve. But I think on the other side, price go up, tech is good, right? So we've seen a lot of interest from people across different ecosystems. I've had more questions from people in EVM land about Solana than I've ever had, which is great. Different chains optimize for different things. And I think that you don't want to be closed-minded to the possibilities of what different chains and communities can offer and what's being built. So seeing that inbound interest and people starting to play around with different things built on Solana, like, that's been all over my feed lately. And of course, that's going to be biased towards the different people that I'm following and whatnot, but that's been a trend for a while. People are building more interesting things that people want to try. And once they've tried them, they have positive things to say about the experience. And that's just kind of snowballed. So I think that that's contributed to it a lot as well, which is really nice to see after the last, like 2 years or so of building, when things were not quite so pretty and positive.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know before you went full-time in Hxro Labs and dove into what you're doing now, you were doing a lot of DeFi education, which I think is super important. You had your own podcast back then as well, the Dead K Bounce podcast. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, because I do think that education in this space in general is really important. And then especially with DeFi, because it's kind of a more like technical or nerdy area that a lot of people are turned off to. But I do think that there are interesting things about DeFi for everybody, not just people that come from a TradFi background or that are passionate about finance and want to learn how to trade and do all of these things. But there's a lot of implications to the things that we're trying to accomplish with DeFi systems that can be appealing and interesting to everybody. So I'm curious, when you were doing a lot of your DeFi education, what did you find to be some of the best ways to explain DeFi to your normie friends, especially those that aren't naturally that interested in finance?
Yeah, sure. So just for context of people who aren't familiar, I basically built out and ran a crypto education platform for financial advisors, institutional money managers, the more like TradFi boomer crowd. Definitely a little early on that. Now we're seeing that group of people be much more interested with like Bitcoin ETF approval and whatnot. But at the time in 2021, when the markets were going up, a lot of people had more interest, lots of questions, lots of conversations, lots of presentations, lots of different investor committees that wanted to learn about Bitcoin and other things. It was very, very 101. Like, you talk to someone and they'd say that they want to learn about crypto or talk about it, and then they'd be like, well, what's a blockchain? So it was very, very elementary for most of it. But the one thing that I think is important to remember, regardless of who you're talking to, money is universal. Money and finances. So to your point, you don't have to be working in finance to care about financially related things. It's your life. It's everyone's life. It impacts you in a big, big way, regardless of talking about spot and derivatives trading markets. Like, that's not going to interest everyone. But talking about payments, talking about borrow, lend, that type of thing, money impacts everyone around the world, whether you want it to or not. And finances are really, really important. And the financial system has a lot of things that aren't so great about it, that we're all accustomed to and just kind of dealt with because it's the way that things are. So I think pointing to a lot of the inefficiencies in the day-to-days of what bug a lot of people, but we just put up with and have forever until now, kind of bridging those two things and talking about the day-to-day impacts and what blockchain could optimize for is really, really important. You see a lot of people get way too technical into the weeds about these things. And I think that's where you lose people because, to your point, most people didn't work in finance, aren't developers, or aren't that interested in like the super niche or highly complex things. Like most people aren't interested in the regular stock market, let alone like shitcoin markets or all of these like complex DeFi solutions. So I think bridging it down to like first principles of, I know it sounds kind of like cringeworthy. I'm not like making them read the Bitcoin white paper from Satoshi or anything like that. Like, again, we'll lose them, but thinking of the day-to-day bottlenecks or really clunky systems, wire transfers, the fees that are associated, multiple business days of waiting for the money that you own to be transferred from one place to another for you to actually have it. Those are things that we just put up with. And it's crazy to think about people putting up with it for as long as we have with all of the different tech advancements we had in other places. So there's so much room for opportunity for optimizing those things. And I think when you bring it back to those really baseline daily needs of like where normal people interact with the financial system, that stuff matters. And I mean, people try to get way too into the weeds on the more technical stuff. And like the way that I see it, you start at the basics of like what people would actually interact with on a day-to-day, not being in the middle of this chaotic space every day. And if they are interested, then they're going to start asking questions. Then they're going to be digging into things a little bit more. But you have to start with the stuff that appeals to them, right? It goes back to like the consumer apps that I found interesting on Solana. To your point, what are people everywhere caring about? They want things to be fast, cheap, simple to use. Like I always boil it down to those three things because people try to overcomplicate. How do we make it cheaper or faster for people to get the money that is theirs? When you have a paycheck, or if you're a merchant that's managing a store, how do you wouldn't it be nice if you could have the funds that, a customer is sending to you, like automatically in like your bank account or whatever, right? Like you're not waiting over the weekend if you make a sale on a Saturday and getting those funds on a Monday. Real-time payment flows, real-time settlement. Like those things can impact and make lives better. And I mean, there's a lot of other examples, but I mean, I always try to pair it back to that because I get excited about things. That's not what most people are going to be excited about. And if they have the questions, they will ask. So just try to keep it simple as much as you can. And it's really, really hard. It's all technical, right? So I think trying to keep it to a big picture is definitely like a concerted effort that requires a lot of time. And you have to understand the complex things well to know how to boil it down to what matters.
Yeah. And I think if we think more globally too, the implications of DeFi are even more impactful. Obviously the instant payments affects a lot of people, even within the US. Like a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck and they need that money on Friday when they're supposed to get their paycheck, not on Monday or 3 business days later when the banks decide to process the checks. And that's a really important part of everyday life for a lot of people in America. But like zooming out even more globally, it's like if I want to send money to family in other countries, that process is super difficult without crypto. For friends that live in certain countries with unstable governments and political systems where their fiat currency is extremely unstable and the $100 you had yesterday could be $1 today, and you just never know when that's going to happen. I mean, the fact that you would trust an antiquated traditional system that treats you that way instead of adopting or trying out something that maybe seems a little risky but could improve your life a lot more than your current state, that's I think why people from certain countries understand crypto inherently so much better than a lot of people in the US do. It's a lot harder to convince people in the States or in Canada where our fiat is relatively stable to try out crypto because they're like, well, we trust the banks, we trust the systems, we trust the regulation.
That part is so important. And I think the more global examples that you gave are so powerful. And the one realization that I came to when I was doing like the education thing for probably like 18 months, maybe like however long I did it for, is I had started with more of like the ethical ethos part of it, like war cry kind of rally type of stuff. And I totally agree with you. In the US and Canada, a lot of the people that you're talking to, and some people will definitely get it, right? If you're in like a sort of banking desert where you don't have access to brick and mortar banks, or like you didn't have the money that you needed to do XYZ, and there's like a loan shark basically that you can get money from, and then they hit you with this absolutely crazy rate. to like pay that loan back. Like those things are predatory, but people do what they have to do when they have to do them and get access to funds. People will do whatever's required in a lot of cases if something's important enough. But most people, when you talk to them in the US or like North America generally, it just doesn't hit for them the same, right? Because, and it sounds bad, but we are inherently selfish creatures at the end of the day. How does this help me? What can this fix in my life? And if you're not in a place where it's a super volatile currency or like a very corrupt government or something that's impacting you directly, those stories aren't always powerful enough to get you to switch from the systems you're using today because there's not urgency. One of the biggest use cases and the killer use case for crypto, kind of to what you were saying, is stablecoins and global remittances from one country to another and being able to transfer funds. Like that would change so many people's lives, and it already is. But that's not something that a lot of people hear or a lot of people generally need to think about. I'd love to be able to send money to other countries in a way that's not this sketchy little outfit at my local Walmart where you don't even know if it's going to make it to the person and the fees are crazy. That's not how things should be. And there is a huge opportunity to overhaul that entire system. And that's why I totally agree with you. Like, people in different countries understand the value proposition of crypto significantly more depending on where they're coming from. And the US just sort of lacks that, which is a bit frustrating. You know, they're like, have fun with your magical internet money. And it's like, okay, well, there is powerful tech behind this that has the power to do really positive things and make positive change. You just see the degenerate part in the crazy headlines because that's what catches attention. But when you really dig into it, there's a lot of value there for really important issues.
I do think that's really true that we only care about things that apply to us directly. Another use case just to throw out there too, even within the States, is there are a lot of people that work in fields that aren't as regulated or aren't as accepted. For example, sex workers who end up being unbanked because their profession isn't accepted. And so there are people like this living in countries like the US where the currency is not the problem, the stability is not the problem. But I think really the more we can get out and talk to more people and be more open about our finances, I think that's another problem in the US is that we don't talk about our finances when we go out to dinner with our friends. It would be rude for me to ask you anything about your finances and you probably wouldn't want to tell me. And so then it's like we don't really understand what people are going through outside of ourselves because we don't really talk about it. So maybe that's the first step, is opening up more, making it less taboo to talk about our finances and share more about it so that we can learn from each other and learn what people are really going through and how we can find solutions to these problems.
Yeah, I mean, like the big problems don't get uncovered if you don't talk about them. If you just shove it under the rug, like that's why so many things that maybe are suboptimal systems are just used because people just put up with it and it's not a topic of conversation of how can we improve this. People just settle for it. So if people don't speak up and collectively decide like we need to make a change or we should, it'll benefit people, and think that the juice is worth the squeeze on kind of trying to fight for that and get it done, like it's not going to change. And I think one issue is everyone always assumes that they can't make a change in like the grand scheme of things, but it definitely takes a massive collective of people to push anything forward. And the cool thing about crypto is there are people who actually, it's a mixed bag. There are people who are more on like degenerate side, want to make money, see it as opportunity to grow their wealth, more of like selfish purposes, which to a point I understand. But there is a group of people who wants to make the systems that we use today better and to make things more equitable and more accessible to everyone. And that's really great. And a lot of people think that's sort of like mumbo jumbo, like kind of bullshit, but I really don't think it is. We just have to have enough people believing in that, and like maybe the making money part is more of a driver for people, but if it gets us to a point where things improve, I'll take that.
What about when you speak to more institutional people? Because I know that's where you started your DeFi education, is more with these TradFi institutional workers and people that work in finance and already have these very well-established preconceived notions about our financial system and how financial systems should be. How do you educate those people about crypto? Because I would imagine that they're even more set in their beliefs of how a traditional finance system should operate. And it's probably even harder to get them to change their mindset and be open to exploring a new form of currency.
Yeah, I mean, if we're being realistic, a lot of the money manager type of people that I talk to want exposure to the price action, and that's it. Which, something has to get a foot in the door. And if that's something that piques the interest, and then you have financial incentive to dig into the tech and learn more, I will take that. And I think that that's like a more realistic way to think about it than trying to convince people of like the ethos and the bigger picture, because a lot of people aren't just going to spend the time. They want to know, again, how will it benefit me? How can I make money? So a lot of the kind of more money manager types of people, I mean, they need to do their due diligence on the tech because they have requirements to fulfill in terms of due diligence of putting client funds or institutional funds anywhere. But even if you're talking about just Bitcoin, the price action is the part that they want the exposure to. When you get into conversations with more open-minded people, I mean, I think there are a lot, but they might not publicly talk about it, but people who do understand that there is a ledger type of technology behind this that can help to optimize payments and make it the experience a lot more seamless. But I think a lot of them are understandably wondering at what point would this actually be adopted, because these systems take forever to change. There are these massive firms where even getting a minor change implemented at the firm takes a really excruciating process of approvals and implementation and whatnot, like so much red tape. So I don't think a lot of people are long-term bearish on what the tech could do, but I think they're very skeptical of where it could be implemented at scale and when it would actually impact things in a big way. So a lot of people are trying to learn about it, but it's not a massive incentive to dive in yet, other than getting a little bit of exposure, but they're not going to go all in. To your point, they have very well-established businesses. They're at very well-established firms that, what a lot of people in crypto kind of rag on the traditional financial institutions, they're having no problems with making money. I can promise you that. And no problems with clients and no problems with continuity of their business. They're not going to take a massive gamble of jumping all in on something new. They don't have to. So I think merging the two worlds and finding where it makes most sense to sort of collaborate and bring them together is going to be the first step. And people are interested in it. It's just, how do you actually implement this at scale? And that's a lot of work. And how do they know if it's worth it?
What have you found to be some of the most convincing arguments for people like that? Because I think in order to get mainstream adoption of crypto, we do need to reach the institutional people and we need to change their minds. Yes, like we can go to the consumers and get enough push from the consumers for the institutions to change their minds, but would be even faster if we could just convince the institutional workers directly. Mm-hmm. What have you found to be some of the most convincing arguments for people like that?
I wish I had a good answer for that because it's only so convincing, right? The one thing that has like shown a bit of confidence is not talking to institutional crowd quite as much these days, more like friends that are in that side of the business still. So it like happens a little bit, but I've at least been seeing some flows from institutions. Those have been continuously pouring in. That to me is a first step. It might not be much for them, but it's like showing a sign of like, I don't think this is a total zero. Like people in finance understand the idea of asymmetric bets. It's why you diversify, right? You can throw eggs in 1,000 different baskets. And if a couple of those baskets 100x, like you're in a good spot. I think they see crypto the same way of like, I don't know if this is going to work out, but I want exposure to it just in case it does. I'm not going to put everything into it right now, but I'm willing to dip my toes in. And that as a first step is great. So I know that's not like a great answer, but even just getting a little bit of exposure from a price perspective and putting assets into that space, going through the motions of, oh, where are the different places that I can purchase this? Should I self-custody? Am I more comfortable sticking with something like Coinbase? Do I not care about the risks associated with centralized exchanges? Like going through the motions of even that, you're educating them, they're learning a bit about it, they're actually experiencing it. And maybe it's a first step and maybe it's a very, very shallow step in to start. But when you have financial skin in the game, you're going to be more likely to start reading up on other things. And that goes into learning more about the tech and what's possible and different things that are being built, different chains. So it's just going to be a long process. Like this is such a small part of everything else that they're looking at within the world of different financial asset classes, if you will. So it's never going to be as fast as you want. But I feel like having conversations with people where it's like, this doesn't have to be your main thing, but it should be something that you incorporate into the research that you're doing is a lot less overwhelming for them and much more well received. Because I think a lot of crypto people tend to be too pushy about this is the thing. this is what you should be focusing on. This is all that matters. And that's just never true. The maximalist mindset is not one that appeals to the masses. It just doesn't. It appeals to other maximalists. So I think you have to be really reasonable and open-minded when you have conversations with these groups of people. Because again, it's not their day job. It's not going to be everything that they do. But if you find ways to sort of like pill them on it incrementally, that's a better approach, and being welcoming and open and trying to give them resources and educating them. And like, again, not a great answer for you of like specifically what's worked, but I think being understanding of the position that most of the world is in when you're trying to get them in the front door matters a lot. And there's not enough empathy given towards that crowd, in my opinion, from a lot of people within the industry.
Totally. Yeah. We got to reach people where they're at. I think we all need to go out there and just do it more, like just try more, and then share what's working with each other. That should be the dialogue going on Twitter, right? Is like, let's just share knowledge and share what's working for everybody. And then we can all go out and do the things that work and not waste time trying the things that don't work. Compared to most of my friends in Web3, I'm not the most online person. And with how fast things move in this space, it can be really challenging to keep up with the newest projects and what's trending. That's why I love Forage, a community-curated front page for launches shaping on-chain culture. A Forage launch page combines a press release and a commemorative mint into a sleek single page where they garner support in the form of mints. Projects receiving more mints are bumped to the top of the page, which means I can finally stop doom scrolling or worrying about missing an important launch and simply check Forage to stay up to date on what's happening on-chain. And as an added bonus, Forage uses protocol rewards, so supporters receive a referral reward each time someone mints through their referral link. Go to forage.xyz to get started today. Last question for you. I have to ask this just because meme coins have been really pumping lately, but I'd love to hear where you stand on meme coins. Do you think they're fun and harmless, or do you think they're a detriment to this space? Where do you stand on that spectrum?
A little bit of both, but I think a net positive, to be honest for you, in terms of exposure, right? Like, you cannot deny mimetic desire, and that's such a strong psychological human thing that you can't deny and is very, very powerful. Meme coins tap into that in a very big way, and I think the communities built around them, while they seem really shallow and like maybe no tech behind them, or maybe it was just like as a joke thing, that has gotten more visibility and more random people into crypto in one way or another than most other things combined. So we can't really knock that in terms of the way that it has onboarded some people, or at least gotten their attention. Like, maybe it's some negative press, but I actually am kind of a believer in the all press is good press, depending on, obviously not absolutely detrimentally horrible blowups and things like that, but it's broadened exposure. It's made it light and fun. Definitely some bad sides to it as well. I can understand why people might not take the space seriously if that's all that they see. But if it's onboarding people, I do think that there's a benefit to that. No one really cares about how you got into the space once you're in. You're in and you're involved in a lot of different things. You have your hands in a lot of different places. Whatever gets you in the door, I feel like, is a means to an end. And meme coins have definitely accomplished that for a lot of people. So I think people tend to knock them more than they think about the potential benefits. And there's certainly bad things to them as well, but you don't really hear people talk about the positive parts of it. You just see them bashing them. And I do think that exposure wise and like trying to make the space interesting, it definitely appeals to some people for sure. So I'm not incredibly bearish on them. People have a tendency to like have too many binary thoughts about it. There's good and bad with it, and you just have to take it. And then hopefully that's a stepping stone for people to see all of the interesting, meaningful, long-term oriented things being built once they're in.
I do think people don't talk enough about the positive sides of meme coins. I think all the people that are bullish meme coins are the really hardcore degens that nobody really likes. But I think the lore and narrative is great for onboarding, like you said. And if that's going to be the way to onboard people to like getting a crypto wallet and trying this out for the first time and holding a coin that isn't worth anything and they have no idea what it is, but at least it aligns with their love of animals, for example, or like something silly like that, like, what harm is there in that? That's getting them one step further, and we're not really harming anybody in the process. So
it feels less high stakes too, right?
Exactly.
You know that the thing about the degenerate gambling side of this is like, most people know what that's hitting for if they're like tossing a little bit in. Or like if I have a friend that's never been in crypto, I'm like, hey, yeah, you like dogs, right? Like, look at this. And you know that they might not be serious, but people will commit to the bit and see what's going on with stuff like that because it's fun and their friends are doing it. It's like a Trojan horse for the serious things in the space or the other stuff that's being built. Meme coins are definitely the horse in that case, in a lot of cases, I think. And it just gets people started, which I see nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. And the fact that you can own, a whole Dogecoin or 100 whole Dogecoins, whereas no one entering the space now is going to own a full Bitcoin at this point. So the fact that you can own a whole thing, I think mentally people like that more than owning like 0.00001 Bitcoin. Like that doesn't feel nearly as exciting to a newcomer, I think. Which, speaking of Bitcoin, actually, one question that I've asked every guest this season is, will Ethereum and or Bitcoin reach all-time highs this year? And I did not anticipate that by the end of the season, this question would already no longer be relevant. So as we know, Bitcoin has already hit all-time highs. So I guess the question is more, do you think Ethereum will also hit all-time highs sometime this year? Or Solana?
Yeah, I mean, I think both. I think Solana's been on a tear even like the last few days.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. Yeah.
Absolutely ripping. I do though. I think that this spring into summer is going to be absolutely crazy. Got the halving coming up and stuff as well. Like there's just a lot going on this year, but I think the positive momentum is just going to continue. So I would not be surprised at all if we see Ethereum and Solana all-time highs pretty quickly. I think Solana, in terms of upside optionality for like being stifled in growth maybe previously with FTX and whatnot, I think there's like a little bit more of opportunity for upside there for sure, but I think Ethereum could hit it as well. So fingers crossed. I have bags of both, so
just there you go. Pump those bags. Yeah. The second part of that question is, what do you think the all-time high price will be in 2024 for each of those?
Everyone's like Bitcoin's 100K. I don't think never say never, but I don't think 100K. I think maybe a little bit under that, but it depends how crazy things get. Solana, oh man, I'm like, what are they even? I'm so funny. I literally never check charts. I'm like, what even?
Yeah, what are they at right now?
What are their all-time highs? Let's look. Because I literally never. I'm so like long-term oriented. I just buy things and never look again. Solana's at 179, almost 180 at the time of this. I think all-time high is around 267.
Okay. And then I think Ethereum all-time high is like 48, 4,900, more or less.
Yeah. Oh man. I'm like, are we just like putting shots in the dark here? I think.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Ethereum, 5,300 on the year, all-time high. And then maybe Solana like 350. 369. No, I'm just kidding.
I could totally see it. I mean, obviously, I'm pulling this out of my ass as well. Yeah. I don't know anything, but I could see it. Those aren't insanely high numbers in my mind.
I'm not like Bitcoin to a million. Like,
right.
Let's be realistic here. We have enough like dreamers and euphoric people, so I'm trying to keep it at a realistic level. Got to keep people.
I mean, being realistic is being optimistic these days. So I'm all for it. Last thing, Caitlin, before you go, tell people where they can find you if they want to follow you personally. And then feel free to plug anything else where people can go to check out Hxro Labs or anything else you'd like to plug.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. This was fun. I haven't done any sort of podcast or anything in a long time. So if anyone wants to follow me, Twitter's the best way. I'm just like terminally online, and my handle is Dead Kate Bounce. Kate spelled CAIT, just all one word. And then to follow with what Hxro's doing, again, that's like basically betting and derivatives trading on Solana, powering any team that wants to build a UI for end users there, kind of infrastructure level, not the sexiest thing, but powering a lot of really fun things. That's at Hxro Network on Twitter, if anyone happens to want to follow along with that. And then, of course, at Solana, you should know that one for sure as well. Not a Solana Maxi, but a Solana Bull.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for taking the time to come on the podcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is our final episode of the season. We have one more bonus episode coming on Monday, and then we'll be wrapped up for the season. It's crazy how fast it's gone by. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you all soon.